The air in the municipal registry office was stale, thick with the scent of old paper and the faint, institutional smell of floor polish. It was a place devoid of romance, a sterile chamber of bureaucracy. Yet to me, it felt as sacred as any grand cathedral. I stood on the worn parquet floor, my best suit feeling tight across my shoulders, my palms sweating. Opposite me stood Anna, my Anna, her face glowing. Her simple white dress did little to hide the gentle swell of her stomach, a beautiful, perfect curve that held our future. In my hand, the wedding ring felt impossibly heavy, a small, cold circle of gold that represented an entire universe of promises. I was about to become a husband and a father, two words so immense, so powerful, they seemed to vibrate in the quiet room. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, a rhythm of pure, unadulterated joy. Our families were gathered behind us in a small, tight cluster, their hushed whispers a comforting backdrop. The officiant, a stern-looking woman with kind eyes, began her speech, her voice a low, steady drone, reciting the legalities that would bind us together. I barely heard the words. My entire focus was on Anna. I watched the way the flat fluorescent light caught the stray hairs that had escaped her elegant chignon, the way her eyes, a deep, liquid brown, met mine, full of what I believed was a shared, unspoken understanding of the gravity and beauty of this moment. We had chosen this simple, unadorned ceremony because we agreed the marriage wasn't about the spectacle. It was about the substance, about the family we were already starting, the life that was growing inside her, a life I had embraced as my own from the moment she told me. The officiant paused, signaling for the rings. My best man, Liam, gave me a reassuring nod. I turned to take the ring for Anna from her cousin and maid of honor, Jessica. As she stepped forward, a nervous smile plastered on her face. She leaned in close, ostensibly to pass me the ring without dropping it. Her perfume, a sharp citrusy scent, filled my senses for a brief second before she spoke. Her voice was a venomous whisper, for my ears only, a secret delivered with the devastating precision of a surgeon's scalpel. It's not his baby. The words were quiet, barely disturbing the air, but they hit me with the force of a physical blow, a sonic boom that obliterated the sacred silence of the room and my entire world along with it. Time seemed to warp, stretching and slowing. The officiant's expectant smile, Anna's loving gaze, the proud faces of our parents, it all became a tableau, a frozen painting of a life that was, a moment ago, mine. The words echoed in the sudden, roaring void in my head. It's not his baby. I stared at Jessica, her eyes holding a mixture of terror and grim resolution. Then, my gaze shifted to Anna. I was looking for denial, for confusion, for an immediate, angry dismissal of her cousin's insanity. But I found none. What I saw in her wide, terrified eyes was a flicker of something else, something I had never seen there before. Guilt. It was a split-second confirmation, a silent confession, that tore through me with an icy, brutal finality. The gold ring, once a symbol of our infinite future, suddenly felt like a piece of ice, burning my skin. My fingers went numb, losing their grip. It slipped, falling from my hand and hitting the polished floor with a series of sharp, metallic clinks that echoed through the stunned silence of the room. The sound was obscene, a definitive, shattering punctuation mark at the end of a sentence I hadn't even known was being written. Every head turned. The officiant's mouth hung open. Anna took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. In that moment, holding nothing, I had never felt so heavy, so anchored to a single point of absolute, world-ending devastation. The sound of the ring clattering on the floor was the starting pistol for chaos. The room, once quiet with solemnity, erupted into a cacophony of gasps and frantic, high-pitched whispers. Anna's mother rushed forward, not to me, but to her daughter, shielding her as if I were the source of some sudden, violent threat. My own father took a step towards me, his face a mask of utter confusion and concern. Jessica stood her ground, her face pale but defiant, while her parents shot her looks of pure fury. The scene fractured into two distinct camps, a family feud, erupting in the sterile confines of the registry office, with me standing alone in the no man's land between them, the epicenter of a disaster I didn't understand. The air crackled with accusation and betrayal, and I felt the weight of every eye in the room, judging me, pitying me, condemning me for a crime I hadn't even known existed. Liam, my best man and oldest friend, was the first to reach me. His hand clamped onto my arm, his grip firm and grounding amidst the swirl of my dissolving reality. We're leaving. Now, Alex, he said, his voice a low urgent command that cut through the noise. He pulled me towards the door, away from Anna's first, heart-wrenching sob, away from her father's angry, questioning stare fixed on me. The walk down the long marbled corridor of City Hall felt like a public execution. Strangers in the hallway turned to stare at the man in the wedding suit with a face like thunder, being frog-marched away by his friend, leaving a bride in his wake. Every footstep echoed with failure and humiliation. The grand, imposing building that was supposed to be the backdrop to my greatest joy had become the stage for my deepest shame. Outside, the weather had turned. The bright, hopeful morning had curdled into a sullen gray afternoon, and a cold, miserable rain began to fall, plastering my hair to my forehead. Liam navigated me into the passenger seat of my own car, the car we had decorated with a "just married" sign just that morning. The irony was a bitter pill in my throat. He got on the driver's side and pulled away from the curb, the wipers starting their hypnotic, rhythmic sweep across the windshield, smearing the view of the weeping city. We drove in absolute silence, the only sound the swish of the wipers and the hum of the tires on the wet asphalt. The familiar urban landscape of my home, the bustling streets and towering buildings, seemed alien and menacing, a hostile environment I no longer recognized. When we reached the apartment, our apartment, the silence within was even more profound and terrifying. The living room was filled with neatly stacked wedding gifts. The nursery door was slightly ajar, revealing the corner of the crib we had so lovingly assembled together just last weekend. Every object was a monument to a future that had been a lie, a carefully constructed fiction I had wholeheartedly believed. I walked into the kitchen and saw the 2 champagne flutes sitting on the counter, ready for a celebration that would never happen. The sheer, suffocating weight of all that fabricated hope, of all that betrayed love, finally broke through the dam of my shock. The strength left my legs, and I collapsed onto a kitchen chair, my head in my hands. The world narrowed to the sound of my own ragged breathing. It wasn't just the betrayal of Anna, the woman I loved. It was the theft of a deeper joy, the profound, earth-shattering love I already felt for a child I had believed was mine. It was a dual assassination of my identity, as both a husband and a father, executed in a single, whispered sentence. A guttural sob tore from my chest, a raw, animal sound of pure, undiluted pain, the first of many that would rack my body in the lonely, silent apartment that was supposed to have been our home. Hours later, after Liam had finally, reluctantly, left me with a promise to call in an hour, the sound of a key in the lock made my entire body go rigid. Anna stepped inside, closing the door softly behind her. The rain had soaked her hair, and her simple white dress was now just a damp, sad piece of clothing. Her face was blotchy and swollen from crying, but her eyes held a new, desperate resolve. She stood there by the door, a stranger in the home we had built together, the space between us, charged with 1,000 unspoken questions and one devastating truth. The air was thick and heavy, and I could feel my heart pounding, a slow, painful rhythm against my ribs, each beat a reminder of the life that had been pulsing inside her, a life that had nothing to do with me. She didn't try to deny it. The words came tumbling out of her, a messy, frantic confession steeped in tears and self-loathing. It had happened 6 months ago, just before our relationship had become truly serious. It was with her ex-boyfriend, a man I knew she had a tumultuous history with, a moment of weakness. She called it a drunken, stupid mistake on a night she felt lost and alone. She said she had broken it off with him for good the very next day, and a week later, she and I had committed to each other, truly and completely. When she found out she was pregnant, she was terrified. She convinced herself, she said, that it had to be mine, that the timing could work, that a lie was better than losing me and the stable, loving future I represented. Her justification was a story of fear. She painted a picture of herself as a scared, desperate woman, too afraid to face the consequences of her actions. "I love you, Alex," she repeated, the words sounding hollow and rehearsed now. "I love you so much, and I just knew you would leave me if I told you the truth. I couldn't lose you. I thought we could be a family, that it wouldn't matter where the baby came from, that our love would be enough to make it ours. I was going to be a good wife to you, a good mother. I was so stupid. I just wanted us." She was trying to frame her deception as a desperate act of love, a misguided attempt to preserve our happiness. But all I could hear was the screeching, selfish terror that had made her choose a lie over the truth, over me. I listened to the entire story without saying a word, a cold, empty numbness spreading through my veins. The anger I expected to feel was absent, replaced by a profound, cavernous disappointment. Her reasons, her fears, her pathetic justifications, none of it mattered. It was all just noise, obscuring the one, simple, unalterable fact. She had looked me in the eye every single day and lied. She had allowed me to fall in love, not just with her, but with a child, our child. A fantasy she had curated and maintained with terrifying skill. I wasn't her partner. I was her solution. I was the safe harbor she had steered her wrecked life into, hoping I would never look below the WATERLINE. When she finally ran out of words, the silence that fell was heavy and final. "You need to leave, Anna," I said, my voice sounding distant and foreign to my own ears. There was no rage in it, only a dead, hollow finality. "Take your things and go." She started to protest, to plead again, but the look on my face must have told her it was useless. She gave a final, broken sob, turned, and walked out of my life, leaving me utterly alone in the wreckage of our shared future, the ghost of a family I had loved so fiercely haunting every corner of the silent, lonely rooms. The days that followed were a blur of logistical and emotional demolition. The first and most difficult task was telling my parents. The phone call was a torturous exercise in relaying a story that still felt unreal. My mother's shocked silence was somehow worse than the anger I had anticipated, and my father's strained, careful questions were laced with an undercurrent of sorrow and disappointment. Then came the endless, humiliating calls to caterers, to the venue for the reception we were supposed to have, to the travel agent to cancel the honeymoon we would never take. Each conversation was a fresh stab, forcing me to repeat the phrase, "The wedding has been called off," words that tasted like ash in my mouth. I was systematically dismantling a life, unplanning a future, piece by painful piece. Liam was my shadow, my shield. He moved into my spare room without asking, a silent, constant presence that kept the crushing loneliness at bay. He answered my phone when I couldn't bear to speak to another pitying relative. He dealt with the mountain of wedding gifts, organizing their return with a quiet efficiency that I was incapable of. He didn't offer platitudes or try to cheer me up. He just sat with me in the evenings, the two of us watching meaningless television. His presence, a solid, reassuring anchor in the storm of my grief. He was the barrier between me and the well-meaning but intrusive world, allowing me the space I needed to simply breathe and survive the immediate, overwhelming aftermath. My mind became a torture chamber. I was haunted by the memories of the past year, replaying every moment with Anna, sifting through them for clues I might have missed. Every loving glance, every shared laugh, every tender touch was now tainted, suspect. Was any of it real? Or was I just a willing fool in a long con? A man so desperate for a family that he was blind to the truth right in front of him. This deep, corrosive self-doubt was a more formidable obstacle than the anger. The betrayal hadn't just destroyed my trust in her. It had shattered my trust in my own judgment, my own instincts, leaving me feeling fragile and hopelessly naive. One evening, a text message illuminated my phone's screen. It was from Jessica. It was long and rambling, a mix of apology and justification. She wrote that she had wrestled with the decision for weeks, that she loved her cousin but couldn't stand by and watch her build a life, my life, on such a devastating lie. "You are a good man, Alex," she wrote. "You didn't deserve that. I know I destroyed everything, but I hope one day you'll understand I did it, because I respected you too much to let it happen." Her message complicated everything. It denied me the simplicity of hating her. She wasn't just a malicious troublemaker. She was a deeply conflicted person who had chosen a catastrophic truth over a comfortable lie. There were no clear villains in my story, only flawed, broken people, and I was one of them. The turning point came late one night, as I sat in the nursery. I ran my hand over the smooth, wooden rail of the empty crib, and the finality of it all hit me with a fresh wave of agony. I could not stay here. This apartment wasn't a home. It was a mausoleum, a shrine to a ghost family. Every room was saturated with the lie. To heal, I needed to escape. I needed to physically remove myself from the environment of the betrayal. That night, I went online and started looking for a new place to live. A small, furnished apartment on the other side of the city. It was the first proactive decision I had made since the world fell apart. The first small step away from being a victim and towards being a survivor. The new apartment was a sterile white box on the 7th floor of a concrete tower, overlooking a part of the city I barely knew. It had none of the warmth or character of the home I had shared with Anna, but that was the point. It was anonymous. a blank canvas devoid of memories. From the window, I could see the relentless thrum of the city, the endless rivers of traffic, the distant glow of neighborhoods that were not my own. This anonymity became a strange comfort. Here, I was not the man whose wedding had imploded. I was just another face in a sea of millions, a man with no past, which felt infinitely better than being a man suffocated by his. The air was clean of her perfume, the walls were bare of our pictures, and the silence was just silence, not the echoing absence of her voice. I forced myself into a new routine. Every morning, as the city slowly woke, I would walk for hours. I explored the unfamiliar streets, the gritty industrial parks, the quiet, tree-lined residential avenues. I discovered hidden coffee shops and small family-run bakeries. It was a deliberate act of reclaiming my geography, of proving to myself that my life was not confined to the handful of blocks where my old life had played out. These walks were a form of meditation, the rhythmic pounding of my feet on the pavement, a steady, grounding force. I was not just aimlessly wandering. I was actively searching for a version of myself that existed independently of Anna, a man who could find a quiet moment of peace watching the sun rise over a new and unfamiliar horizon. One Saturday afternoon, in a sprawling hardware store across town, I saw him, Anna's father. He was staring blankly at a wall of paint swatches, looking older and more tired than I had ever seen him. He saw me at the same time, and a look of deep, pained awkwardness crossed his face. I could have turned and walked away, but something held me there. He approached me cautiously, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Alex," he said, his voice raspy, "I am so sorry, for everything. For my daughters, for what she did." He couldn't even name the crime. In his eyes, I saw not just shame for his daughter, but the sorrow of a fellow victim. He too had been deceived. His own dreams of a grandchild and a son-in-law he genuinely liked snatched away. We were two men, connected by a woman we both loved, standing in the ruins she had created. The encounter opened a new, deeper chamber of my grief. It wasn't just about losing a wife. It was about mourning a child. I had to consciously grieve the loss of a son or daughter that had never been mine to begin with. I had to let go of the imagined first steps, the phantom sleepless nights, the ghost of a tiny hand wrapped around my finger. It was a bizarre, painful process of mourning a fantasy. I had to accept that the paternal love I felt, which had been so real and powerful, was for a person who did not exist in the context I had created. It was the most difficult and necessary step in my healing, acknowledging the depth of that loss before I could ever hope to move past it. During this time, Liam, ever the pragmatist, pushed me to find a focus. My father had left me his old woodworking tools, which had sat collecting dust in a storage unit for years. Liam helped me clear out a corner of my new, small living room, and I started a project, building a simple, solid oak bookshelf. The work was tangible, demanding my full attention. The sharp, clean scent of sawdust, the precision of the measurements, the satisfying resistance of wood to the sit was all real. In a life that had become a chaotic mess of lies and emotions, the logical, methodical process of building something, solid and true with my own two hands, became my salvation. It was a way to rebuild, literally and figuratively. Nearly 8 months had passed since that day at the registry office. The seasons had turned, winter's chill giving way to the tentative warmth of spring. The city was coming back to life, and in some small, fragile way. So was I one afternoon. A thick, cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox, addressed in Anna's familiar, elegant handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. It wasn't a plea or a demand, but a long, carefully written letter. She informed me that the baby had been born a month prior. It was a boy. She and the biological father were attempting to co-parent, a difficult and clumsy arrangement. The letter was devoid of excuses, filled instead with a raw, painful accounting of her actions, and a deep, unambiguous apology for the profound pain she had caused me. Reading her words, I felt a strange and unexpected shift inside me. The fiery anger that had smoldered for months finally cooled, leaving behind only a vast, melancholy sadness. The baby was real now, a person in the world, just not my person. The story had moved on, and I was no longer a central character in it. This realization, paradoxically, was liberating. It allowed me to finally detach, to see the situation not as a personal attack on my life, but as a separate, tragic narrative that had briefly and catastrophically intersected with my own. The letter was an ending, a confirmation that the door I had closed was now locked for good. That evening, Liam came over, and I showed him the letter. We talked for hours about forgiveness. What was it, really? He argued that it wasn't about absolving Anna, or telling her that what she did was okay. Forgiveness, he said, looking at me intently over the rim of his beer bottle, is about you. It's about you putting down the bag of rocks you've been carrying around every single day. It's about letting the poison out so it doesn't kill you. It has nothing to do with her. His words resonated deeply. Holding on to the rage and the sense of betrayal was a form of self-imprisonment. It kept me tethered to the past, chained to the person I was on that horrible day. My own personal growth, I realized, was contingent on this one final act. I had to forgive Anna, not for her sake, but for mine. It was the only way to reclaim my own future, to stop her actions from defining the rest of my life. And I also had to forgive myself. I had to forgive myself for not seeing the signs, for being so trusting, for being vulnerable enough to love someone so completely. My vulnerability wasn't a weakness. It was a sign that I had been open and willing to give my whole heart. Her betrayal was her failure, not mine. This understanding was the key that would finally unlock my prison. A few days later, I sat down and wrote a reply. It was short, only a few lines. I acknowledged her letter and her apology. I told her that I wished her and her son peace. I didn't say I forgave her. The word felt too big, too cliché. Instead, I hoped the sentiment of my words would convey a sense of release, of letting go. I folded the paper, sealed it in an envelope, and placed it on the completed oak bookshelf that now stood proudly in my living room. I didn't mail it yet. The act of writing it, of articulating the closure, was, for the moment, enough. It was a promise I was making to myself. A full year passed. The bookshelf I had built was now filled with books, a solid, tangible testament to a year of slow, deliberate healing. My sterile apartment had transformed into a home, reflecting the person I was becoming, not the person I had been. It was filled with the scent of sawdust and coffee, the sounds of my own music, the evidence of a life being lived. The city outside my window no longer felt alien. It was simply my city, the backdrop to my new, quieter, and more authentic existence. The trauma had not disappeared, but it had been integrated, its sharp edges worn down by time and intention. It was a part of my story, but it was no longer the whole story. The support I had received, particularly from Liam, had been the scaffolding that allowed me to rebuild myself. Our friendship had deepened, forged stronger in the fire of my crisis. My relationship with my own family had also found a new, more honest footing. The shared pain had stripped away pretenses, allowing for a more open and vulnerable connection than we'd had before. In a strange way, the destruction of my old life had forced the creation of a new one, built on a more solid and truthful foundation. I had been broken down to my core components, and had to consciously decide how to put myself back together. One evening, scrolling idly through a social media feed, I saw a photo posted by a mutual acquaintance. It was of Anna, holding her son at a birthday party. The boy was smiling, a happy, beautiful child. A faint, ghostly pang resonated in my chest, the last echo of a love that had once been all-consuming. But it was just that, an echo. There was no anger, no fresh wave of grief. I could look at this image of the life that could have been, and I could feel a sense of distant, detached peace for them. I was finally free from the gravitational pull of that alternate reality. The next morning, I took the letter I had written months ago from its place on the bookshelf. I walked to the post office, the morning air crisp and clean. The act of dropping the envelope into the mailbox felt monumental, a final, quiet severing of the last thread. It was no longer a grand emotional gesture. It was a simple, administrative act of closing a file. I wasn't doing it for her. I wasn't doing it for absolution. I was doing it for me, a final confirmation to the universe and to myself that the chapter was well and truly over. I felt lighter as I walked away. Later that day, I found myself walking through a park downtown. The sun was bright, the sky a brilliant, cloudless blue. Children were laughing on the playground, their shouts of joy filling the air. A year ago, that sound would have been a knife in my heart. Now, it was just life. It was just the beautiful, messy, and unpredictable sound of the world moving forward. I sat on a bench, turned my face towards the sun, and closed my eyes. I was not the same man I had been. I was scarred, yes, but I was also stronger, more self-aware. I had learned the profound difference between the blind faith of a naive heart and the conscious, courageous vulnerability of a man who had survived the worst, and was still willing to open himself up to the possibility of a new day.